you had mentioned anxiety.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to get back to that, because that is something that, we've had a number of people contacting the show, asking, what modality is the best for, just being nervous.
There's a lot of, well, first of all, I was a performer for many years. I worked on Broadway. I've done over 6,000 shows.
Wow.
In my career. And anxiety and nervousness is a part of that profession and part of that process. So that sort of, that experience, and I started performing when I was 21 years old, led me to try to find a solution to the often overwhelming feeling of anxiety that comes from anticipation, that comes from having a new experience, putting yourself out there on the line. And it led me to study a lot of different things. Ultimately, what I discovered was a very simple process based on a model of understanding what anxiety is. And essentially, anxiety is an emotional reaction to a perceived event or issue. So you have an image in your mind of something that's going to happen, and then you interpret that image and then react to it emotionally, such as you're waiting for test results,
right.
From the doctor. Will they be good? Will they be bad? So if I'm going to focus on that, on the negative, I will then react emotionally to that as if it were true. Well, I haven't even gotten the information yet.
Right, you're right.
But I'm anticipating that it's going to be bad, and now I'm already reacting emotionally with fear. Anxiety is a degree of fear.
Right.
And we can have a mild degree of fear, which often can be motivating, but when it becomes more intense, it becomes debilitating. And a lot of people suffer from debilitating anxiety.
And do they know it?
They know they're having that experience. I don't know if most people understand how to respond to it.
Okay.
Anxiety is a reaction. Now, you have a choice. You can react or you can respond. A reaction is largely habitual, unconscious, unexamined. A response is fully conscious. You are choosing to respond to this feeling, this sensation, this issue or event with specific tools and resources. The way that I teach it, your most powerful tool is your most basic one, and that is breathing.
Okay.
So if you understand the value and the power of breathing, you already have a very powerful tool, and it's something that we all do on average 20,000 times a day.
My.
20,000 times a day we take a breath.
Yeah.
But breath is our primary source of energy. It's also our primary source of expression. So every time you exhale, you're expressing, not just the breath itself, but you're expressing feeling, you're expressing energy. So when you react to something fearfully, and you begin to create what we call a charge in our nervous system, and that can be a mild charge, it can be a very intense charge. Oftentimes we will contain that energy, we'll hold it inside. And we often do that because we believe that if I can hold it steady, that I will be in control, and that control will make me feel safe and secure. But it's also like putting something under a microscope. If I can contain it, I can then look at it and analyze it, and hopefully mentally figure out how to resolve it. That rarely happens, though. The moment you put something in to contain it, the moment you hold onto it, you create stasis, and that manifests as feeling stuck. And when you're really stuck, it's really hard to think of what to do. So at the most basic level, fear, the energy of fear, is paralysis by degrees.
I've seen that. You see people and they get more afraid, they kind of just close in on themselves.
Well, I'll often ask people, have you ever been scared stiff?
Yeah.
And some people say, yes, I have. Well, you can't move.
Yes.
That's an intense degree of fear.
Right.
Understand? Anxiety is a mild degree of fear. And so we can respond when it's really mild, and we can transform that quite easily simply by breathing consciously with an image of grounding that energy.
Very interesting. Okay, so could you give us an example of how?
Sure. So essentially there are I've created a little technique called the 9-breath rule, and it's 3 sets of 3 breaths. I discovered this one day while I was riding the subway, and I used to suffer from extreme anxiety and panic attacks and didn't really understand why or what to do about it. Through my training and searching, I got these tools and these resources. I'm on the train one day and I'm feeling fine, and then within a few seconds, I'm having an anxiety attack. And fortunately, that time, I asked myself an important question: what can I do in response to this?
Very smart to even have be cognitively.
It's hard to think of the question when you're having a panic attack.
It really is.
Because it really feels life-threatening.
Right.
So I asked myself that question, and what came to mind was, do what I have been learning to do, which is ground and center myself. Grounding is a fluid process. It's not a one-time deal. And we ground ourselves by setting our energy into motion. Most essential motion is breathing, tied to the energy of emotion. So I like to describe emotion as energy in motion.
I like that.
And then directing it into the ground. So I'm standing on the train, and I start to breathe deeply into my nose, out to my mouth, and just letting the breath out. I'm not controlling it. I'm not going, which is a control breath. I'm just like a sigh, just going, and letting it drop, letting it drop. At the same time, I'm visualizing a stream going through my body into the ground. I'm consciously commanding my energy to ground, connect to the earth. Within a few moments, that feeling subsided. And it was an extraordinary experience, because I suddenly realized I made that happen, especially having thousands of panic attacks up to that point and feeling out of control or helpless. Suddenly I realized, wow, I just made that happen. Could I do it again? So I imagined, what if I had a panic attack and just like that, starts again. And what's interesting is I totally forgot what to do in that moment. That's how strong that is.
Yeah.
And so I started to backtrack and go, what did I do before? I took that deep breath, I channeled it down, so I started doing it again, and I got the same result. I neutralized that effect, and I became calmer once again. From that, I learned some very interesting things, that if I counted my breaths, I shifted my focus away from my reaction and onto my response. So I started counting in 3s. And what I would do is I would say 1, 2, 3. And then I would notice how I felt. I would acknowledge, accept, and allow how I felt. I didn't fight it. I didn't pretend that I wasn't feeling it. I fully accepted it. And then I did it again. And I would count 1, take a breath, 2, take a breath, 3, take a breath. And I noticed by the end of 3 sets of 3, I was feeling fine. So I started to teach this to my students and my clients.
Right.
And I found that it was effective pretty much for everybody.